live streaming worldwide at kkla.com, plus at christianradio.com and iHeartRadio. This is the intersection of faith and reason.
The Adoption Answers Show is sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills on 99.5 KKLA. The intersection of faith and reason.
May is National Foster Care Awareness Month. And today we're going to hear from a mom who wasn't thinking about adoption at all. In fact, she had one biological child, and then suddenly the Lord laid it on her heart. That's coming up on the Adoption Answers Show. Welcome to the Adoption Answers Show. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Lara Scott, along with Michelle Detman, who is a Christian life and adoption coach and the director of AdoptionCenterofHope.com. Now, with over 400,000 children in our foster care system here in the United States, we have over 400,000 real reasons to spotlight and share a whole lot more on this topic.
Doesn't that number astound you? Mm-hmm. I live in a city with a population of about 125,000, and to think that even tripling that number does not total the number of children who have been neglected and abused who are currently in the system is heartbreaking. I am so glad that we are talking about this today.
Yes, and there's so much to talk about. Our guest is Brittany Keeley, a wife and mom who is here today to share the remarkable story of how the Lord brought their family together.
I recently met Brittany, and then she shared her story with me. It was evident how God took care of every detail of their family and took them on this surprise journey, which has brought them tremendous blessings. Welcome, Brittany. Thank you so much for being with us here today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, we had talked earlier this week, and I was just so intrigued by your story and God's faithfulness to your family on your journey. And I want our listening audience to be able to hear all the details of what you shared with me. Can you just remind me about how you were called to adoption? When did the Lord start tugging on your heart with adoption?
Adoption has been in my family, different types of adoption, domestic adoption. My brother is actually adopted through the foster care system, and so I've seen adoption. But when my husband and I began to think about adoption, I would say that it was back. We had an ectopic pregnancy in January of 2008. It was on January 8th, 2008 to be exact, that we had to go in for emergency surgery. And while I was in the hospital recovering, I had journaled that I felt that the Lord was going to use this for adoption. And that was one of the first times that the Lord spoke to my heart about adoption, and I didn't really know where or which avenue we would go in that direction, you know. And so it was in September of 2009. Focus on the Family had their I Care About Orphans Wait No More event, and I attended with a friend. And my husband was still just kind of like, go ahead and go check it out and go get some details, but he wasn't really open to adoption really at that point.
Right.
After that event, I just couldn't get it out of my head, and I just knew. But I really didn't want to convince my husband. I really felt that if it was for us to do, that I would just begin praying, that the Lord would change his heart and that he would be open to adoption. And what happened was, at his workplace, an individual who had aged out of the foster care system moved into the cubicle right next to him. She began talking with him about that, and his heart was completely, in an instant, he knew the Lord was putting it on his heart. And I saw the Lord answer my prayers for my husband, you know, and it was so amazing to see how I didn't have to convince him of those things, but that God really would do that if it was his plan for us to proceed with adoption. And to be totally honest, foster care was my last choice. That was not where I wanted to go. I was scared to commit to just the process. I was very scared, but the Lord led us exactly down that avenue.
So you became a praying wife after the Lord laid on your heart through your experiences about adoption. Did you not talk to your husband about this, or when you brought it up, what was his response?
We talked about it. It was something that we talked about often, and he just didn't really feel that the Lord had shown him that yet.
Right.
And so it was something that we discussed. I was having trouble having a baby, and so we had a miscarriage prior to our biological daughter being born. I'm familiar with that grief and that loss, and that was where I believe that I was the one who really felt it when I went through that loss physically.
Absolutely.
Emotionally, it was that he was being drawn to that. And so it would take different amounts of time, and God would do that differently. So I understood that. And so we did discuss it and talked about it. Adoption in our family is, we have international adoption as well. My sister was going through the process of international adoption. So we were just looking at all of the options, talking about it. But it was really just, I had to wait. I had to wait for God to show him.
And I want to encourage our listeners right now, because that is a very typical scenario. I know that even in my own family, when we were looking at adoption, the Lord had laid it so strongly upon my heart, and my husband wasn't there yet. And so I think when it comes to a mom's heart, that we fall in love with our children at the very thought of them. The very thought of them, the very moment we find out we're pregnant, our dreams are there. We can envision things. And I think for dads, it's different, that they fall in love. Yes, they love the thought, but really the bonding really takes place with them after that delivery of the baby, or after that baby is placed in their family. So sometimes they can't envision and feel the way that we as moms can feel. So I just want to say to you, Brittany, that I am so proud of you for just going to prayer over it. And I want to encourage the women out there who are listening today that prayer really is the key here, because it wasn't Brittany trying to convince her husband that this is what they needed to do. It was the Lord that laid that upon his heart, and that's what makes a more peaceful journey. And so, thank you for sharing that, Brittany. Now, when did you? Now, you had said that you were scared of foster care and foster adoption. So, how was your heart changed? I mean, I know that you went to this event. The Focus on the Family event, which I love those, and I'm so grateful for those. When did you really feel your heart start to move towards foster adoption?
I'm trying to remember. It was just looking at all of the different types of adoption. We were open to a sibling set, and so that was one of the areas that I think that was one of the things that in my mind I was envisioning through our foster care system. But I really feel that there's a misunderstanding of adoption is costly, and it is. If you do domestic adoption or international adoption, foster care adoption is not costly whatsoever. You know, they will reimburse you any of the things that you actually do have to put forward, and so financially, it was the best option for our family to proceed in that way, knowing that there were children here in our foster care system that could be placed in our home and we could be advocating for children's needs immediately was amazing for me. I love advocating, and there are so many children in our foster care system here that need an advocate, that don't have that strong advocate for their needs, and that's where I felt that we could step into that role. It was just something that we would do.
Right.
And with the reunification and doing the concurrent home where you possibly are reunifying a child back with their biological family, that was my greatest fear, and that was something that we actually went through, and God used it actually for our story. So my fear, God intended to use to complete our story. So even those fears, I had to put them in God's hands.
Are you being called to adopt? Do you have questions about the adoption process? Or maybe you or somebody that you know is in an unplanned pregnancy and not really sure what to do? Well, please call our 24-hour helpline to get answers, support, and confidential help right now. Here's the number. 877-714-7888. That's 877-714-7888. Michelle.
So let's share with our listeners what was that part of your story. You opened up your home, you got certified for foster care, or was it foster care for foster adoption?
Yes.
Okay, you got certified, and then you had a placement.
We were certified in December of 2010. We had put down that we were open to children 2 and under and a sibling set. Our first foster placement took place immediately after we were certified. So in December of 2010, we had a little boy placed with us. He was actually reunified with his family on the exact anniversary of my pregnancy loss on January 8th of 2011. That led to the devastation of just, feeling so many emotions, but knowing that God had a plan, we kept moving forward, except that we did update our profile after that and said we were open to an older child. My children, we received a phone call later in January of 2011, and our son was 3 years old, and we wouldn't have gotten that phone call had we not gone through the loss and updated our profile. So when they called us with our boys, Nathaniel was 3 and Isaiah was 7 months old, and that I just knew that had we not updated our profile, we would have never received the phone call for my son. But the craziest detail of this, Michelle, is that in November and December of 2007, when I was pregnant with the baby that I lost with the ectopic pregnancy, I wrote Nathaniel Keeley for his name.
Oh, my goodness.
So when they called me and said, I have these 2 little boys and his name is Nathaniel, I just knew it was God. I knew that he was going to come into my home, and that was my son. And nothing is completely finalized or anything, but I knew that God was going to bring this boy into my home and that he would be my son forever, that God had shown me those details, and even through the devastation of reunification, that God had intended for us to advocate for the needs of that child while he was in my home, and that he would be okay, and that I was supposed to look at Nathaniel and Isaiah and begin advocating for them. And Nathaniel's birth date was when I was pregnant. He was born while I was pregnant. So just all the details of everything, I just knew God was lining those up so that I would emotionally attach and allow myself to attach. One of the quotes that I had heard when I was going through the process, and C.S. Lewis is one of my favorite writers, was that if you love anything, then your heart will be wrung and possibly broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you can't give it away to anybody, not even an animal, because to love is to be vulnerable. And I just knew I needed to love completely. I needed to advocate and love each child completely and trust that God would finalize our family.
That's amazing. Well, the details are just amazing. And so you have a biological daughter that you had before the placement of Nathaniel and Isaiah with you.
Yeah, our daughter Kennedy is 10 years old now. Okay,
so she was how old when the boys were placed with you?
She was 7 years old at the time, yeah.
Okay, so how was that transition with her into your family?
Kennedy had been praying for siblings for a very long time. So she experienced the loss with our ectopic pregnancy, and she continued to just faithfully pray for a sibling, and my husband and I knew she really wanted a sibling, so she prayed and prayed and prayed. When the little boy was placed with us, that was her little brother. She loved on him, and she went through the grief of reunification. However, she knew that if she continued to pray, that God would do something, and she actually prayed with me the night before the boys were placed, and she prayed, Lord, I just want a baby that will stay. And that was her prayer. And the morning, they were placed in the evening after she had gone to sleep. And in the morning, she was getting ready for school. She wakes up, and I carry in Isaiah, who was 7 months old at the time, and I said, God brought a baby last night. And she just, oh my goodness, she just jumped out of bed excited, and I said, well, he has a 3-year-old brother on the couch. And she just, it was like we're going to Disneyland. She was so excited. So Kennedy's been an incredible sister. She definitely prayed for these children to come into our home, and so we remind her of that. When they begin fighting, you prayed for them. Which, they're brothers and sisters, and so they're going to have their normal relationship of fighting and loving, and it's just amazing to see how she made it through that process completely fine. I was worried, and it was nothing that I had to worry about, because God intended to use it to develop her character to be compassionate in the future.
That's wonderful. Yes, and he answered her prayer, her delicate, sweet, tender, child-hearted prayer. God heard her and he answered. And what a gift for her to be able to take that throughout her life. Amazing. Yeah. Wonderful. Okay, so I know that there are people out there who are considering foster care. And so can I just talk to you a little bit about the process right now?
Sure.
You and your husband, Dacer, had signed up to be foster care parents. Am I right? Or did you actually sign up to foster adopt?
We signed up to do the concurrent home, which is foster and adoption, so that if a child is placed and their case goes towards adoption, the child wouldn't have to be moved again. We would be willing to adopt that child.
Okay, that's great for people to know that is a possibility for them, because I think that so many think that, oh gosh, I don't want to foster because I don't want to lose track of that child, or that it would be too painful. And we need to be clear that adoption is a painful process. Foster care is a painful process for people, and it's painful for those children, and that's why they need us. That's why it is wonderful and amazing that you and Dacer prayerfully considered it and then moved forward towards it as the Lord gave you peace about it. But there are so many families that are needed, like Brittany and Dacer. There are families. There are 400,000 children in the foster care system here in the United States of America that don't have families. And so we need to have people to step forward. And so that's why we're sharing the story about Brittany and Dacer today and the miracle of their family. And they opened up their hearts. They prayed about it. The Lord gave them a peace, and they have moved forward. And now they've been blessed with 2 amazing sons, in addition to their biological daughter.
Are you being called to adopt? Do you have questions about the adoption process? Or maybe you or somebody that you know is in an unplanned pregnancy and not really sure what to do? Well, please call our 24-hour helpline to get answers, support, and confidential help right now. Here's the number. 877-714-7888. That's 877-714-7888. Michelle.
When we go back to the story of when they were placed with you, and they were placed as a foster care placement, when did you find out that you were going to be able to adopt them and they were going to be able to stay with you guys forever?
Nathaniel's parental rights had already been terminated. So for Nathaniel, we had the understanding that he needed an adoptive family. He was already there. However, Nathaniel and Isaiah had never met one another prior to being placed in our home. They actually were placed together 1 week before. So they met one another 1 week before, and they're full biological brothers. So they were a difficult case because Nathaniel was adoptable and Isaiah was not. So that's where becoming a foster adoptive home is advantageous, because you, like something like this case, where will they place these children? If you're only open to foster and you're not open to adoption, or if you're only open to adoption, you're going to have a difficulty. And that's what they had with these boys, was that they had a difficult time finding a placement for them. And so when the boys came to our home, we understood that Nathaniel would be adoptable. Isaiah was still in the process of court hearings. And so once you have a foster care placement placed in your home, and even if they are available to adopt, you could finalize in 6 months. Wow. You want to have a 6-month period to get to know the child, to make sure that it's a good fit. And we knew on day one, we knew our baby's first words were, "Dad, can I have a banana?" He was 3 years old, and he called my husband Dad. And
oh my goodness.
Again, Nathaniel did not know who a dad was or who a mom was. He called every woman mom and every man Dad, and that's what we worked on for a very long time, was just identifying the role of family members.
Right. And that you weren't going anywhere, and neither was he.
Exactly.
Amazing. Yeah. Wow. Can we talk a little bit about their birth mom?
Sure.
Okay, so you were able to meet with her.
Yes.
In some of those meetings. And so what's your big takeaway from the fact that you got to know their birth mom?
I consider it a great, great opportunity to have information to share with my children in the future. some of the similarities that they had. As I was sitting there with her doing a visitation for Isaiah, she was talking about skateboarding, and at the time Nathaniel, all he wanted was a skateboard, and it was just one of those things where it was like, I'll have information to share with my son later. I have pictures, I have gifts that she gave, and as God leads and wherever our story goes, and possibly even through this show in the future, that my children would have the opportunity to extend the love of Christ to their biological mother and be able to show her that God loves her. And thank you so much for choosing life, and be able to explain the life that they had. And, I really don't know where our story will be, and I don't know, my mother adopted my brother, and she was able to stay in contact with his birth mother, and my brother ended up extending forgiveness to her, and she's walking with the Lord, and that's so encouraging to me, is that it's not just our children. There's so much more going on with these stories, and we have the opportunity to pray for individuals.
That's
I pray for their birth mom every single day.
Yeah, absolutely.
She's an extended part of my family.
Yes,
she's the reason why I have them.
I understand. I know that she was young. I know that she too had gone through foster care herself, and so there wasn't a lot of stability in her lifetime, and not a lot that had been taught to her about how to live responsibly. And she did the best that she could in her short time. And yes, that she chose life is miraculous, and I'm so glad that she did. But yeah, that's an opportunity as their mom to be able to pray their biological mom through as well. And adoption, it really is, it's all about it, redemption. And that's what it is. And to be able to share with them the beauty and the good things about their biological mom, rather than saying, oh, she, the negatives, is so beneficial for children, because you want them to feel good about where they came from. Brittany, thank you so much for being here with us today. I so appreciate you sharing your story of being the prayerful wife, the mom who opened up her heart after having her heart broken, advocating for these children that God hand chose for you, and for showing up here today and sharing your story and encouraging others that they can too. Thank you, Brittany.
Yeah, of course. And Michelle, if I can just say one other thing, is that if anybody is considering foster adoption and they're just beginning to think about it, the best way that you could just get involved now is to step up alongside of a family that is going through this or has a placement in their home. We have the best support system. We have so many friends and family that come alongside, and as we were going through the certification process, helped us, get a stroller or even the things that we needed, but then also just seeing what the needs of the family are. If we needed clothes or different shoes, hand-me-downs are such a blessing.
Yes.
Just extending a hand to somebody who is in the process of this will open up your eyes to see what it really is, and you can become involved while you're praying about it.
Yeah, support is huge. Support during the process of while you're going through it, and then afterwards as well. To surround yourself with people who will support you physically, emotionally, mentally, and through prayer, spiritually. So thanks for giving that some wise words from a mama who has gone through the foster care adoption system. Thank you, Brittany.
Thank you.
Every child deserves to be loved and have a family. Have you been touched by our show today and need more info about foster care? Well, we have a link on the adoptionanswershow.com website that will answer your questions. So please go to the adoptionanswershow.com and you can find more info there. Now, do you think that you're being called to adopt? As you start on this exciting journey, we want you to be prepared. You can receive our free Beginner's Guide to Adoption by simply emailing us at answers@theadoptionanswershow.com.
I am excited to share our featured family of the week this week. It is Aaron and Amy. And Aaron and Amy are young, they're fun and full of life, and this couple is all about family. And their family has been called to adopt. They have several children already, and their whole family is excited to bring a baby home. As the Lord has placed adoption on Aaron and Amy's heart, he has also lifted boundaries. This family is open to any baby of any gender or ethnicity. Please go to the adoptionanswershow.com and read more about our featured family there.
And we hope you will. They all look just absolutely wonderful. Now, we want to answer all of your adoption questions and are available to do so right now, right this minute. Please call our helpline so that we can help you or pray with you as you seek God's direction here. The number is 877-714-7888. That's 877-714-7888. 7888. Now, if you have a question, others may need an answer to that same question. I know, Michelle, you hear a lot of the same questions coming up. We may just answer your question on one of our upcoming shows. So give us a call at 877-714-7888, or you can email us at answers@theadoptionanswershow.com. Thank you so much for listening to the Adoption Answers Show, where we understand your needs and provide answers.